Lewis. I'm the President and CEO of BOMA Greater Minneapolis. And again, welcome to our BOMA Ed event. It's a 2-hour event, but we're going to have a little break so you can get some coffee and or water or do something, anything you want. Other than we really want you to participate and again use the chat feature. So this is actually the conclusion of our 2020-21 meeting season. We typically take a little break over the summer months and so on, but I can tell you this, we're really hoping that we'll be able to have these in person rather than virtually. So hopefully this is the last virtual event that we'll be putting on. Today's session, as you might know after reading the information, will give us a chance to review all of our experiences over the past 12 to 14 months, and then the knowledge and adaptations that many of you went through with your properties, and hopefully we can all learn from it. And as I said, we're going to come back, roaring back this coming late summer with in-person events. So there's 3 of them, and I'm going to touch on those for just a second. As you know, we delayed our annual building expo. We used to call it the Resource Fair for many years. And this is a great opportunity for our service providers who haven't had quite the chance to interact with all of you with their products and services from our membership. So we really wanted to make this an opportunity to get them and you back together again. And we're going to have more information coming up, but do know that the 2021 Building Expo is themed the Escape Zoom. As you can see on the screen, a little pun there. And it'll be held on August 10th at Earl Brown Heritage Center in Brooklyn Park. Different venue. We used to be in the ballroom all the time at the convention center, but this year we're going to be in a suburban location. We're planning an afternoon event too. That's the other significant difference that will both utilize indoor and outdoor spaces and including a social. So what used to be a late morning lunch and trade show will now be an afternoon and then a social. So information will be coming to you, the exhibitors, in early June. So stay tuned for that. And remember, if you have not been to the Earl Brown Heritage Center, there's plenty of free parking around there. So ease of access in and out. Number 2, we, as you know, we typically had our golf tournament in July. Last year, we moved it to September, and it was glorious and very successful. We made the decision quite some time ago that we're going to continue in September for 2021. It'll be same location, Bunker Hills. Sponsorships also will be opening in early June. So for those whole sponsors and other sponsors, keep an eye out. Information will be coming out directly to you in the next couple of weeks. So Monday, September 13th at Bunker Hills. And as always, you can find current information on all of our events on the BOMA website in our weekly Connect Ed newsletter. There is a 3rd event that we're working on. We have some of the details. We're hoping that it'll be a social and tour of the Dayton's building. That will take place on September 23rd. Again, we're working on some of those logistics. We're hoping to have continuing education credits for that as well. So we're really squeezing in 3 major events over really about a 6-week period. So we're going to come roaring back in 2021 for in-person events. Okay, let's get started on today's session. As I mentioned, that you have been approved, or we have been approved for 2 hours of continuing education credit. And I know the deadline is on the horizon, so hopefully this will help all of you. And you must remain on the session for the full presentation to earn the credit. And we're going to have a short break also, as I mentioned, between the 2 sessions coming up. And I'll emphasize to use the chat feature on questions for the panelists. Put it in for all, because a lot of people like to see what questions are popping up, and so we'll try to do that. Now, this is broken into 2 events. One is the first one, and we're going to really focus on our commercial real estate industry and what modifications have taken place over the course of the last 14 months or so. Part two will emphasize the other business elements that that we're associated with that are different, but hospitality, the theater, and so on. So those folks will be coming up in part two. While the pandemic of the past year all caught us by surprise, certainly building management, many of you on this call, moved quickly to respond to the new environment and enhanced operations for routines and precautions and protocols. Now that some of the normalcy is returning to the industry, we take time to visit some of the lessons that all of you learned, and it'll go in a building manual somewhere from this experience, and that's what this is all about. What are some of the practices you developed in the past year? What should you include in your revised manual? As always, we appreciate the efforts of the Education Committee in coordinating this topic, and I really thank the panelists that are participating and volunteering their time. First, let me introduce our moderator, somebody that many of you know. Shane Zahn is the Director of Safety Initiatives with the Minneapolis Downtown Improvement District, which, if you don't know, is a business-led organization with the mission of making downtown Minneapolis a vibrant, attractive place for recruiting and retaining businesses and residents and visitors. Before working for Downtown Improvement District, Shane worked for Target Corporation as an executive in assets protection. During that time, he helped execute and lead safety initiatives within the newly formed Minneapolis Safe Zone Collaborative, now known as Vibrant and Safe Downtown. And before I toss it over to you, Shane, I just want to, on behalf of BOMA and our members, thank you for your extraordinary efforts during the last 12 months in terms of preparedness, responsiveness, and so on, for some of the civil unrest and the planning of keeping our buildings and individuals safe. So Shane, thank you so much for putting in mega hours in all those efforts. Now with that, I'll shut up and turn it over to Mr. Shane Zahn. Shane?
Thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. As Kevin said, I'm Shane Zahn. I'm the Director of Safety Initiatives for the Minneapolis Downtown Improvement District. I've been with DID since 2009, since we've started. And I office out of the 1st Precinct, so that's where I'm talking to you today from, is the 1st Precinct. Many of you probably recognize DID as our ambassador program, which you'll get to later hear Steve Kramer talk about. But we cover about 120 square blocks of downtown, business-led, business-funded. And I can tell you it's been quite a year and a half with the pandemic and civil unrest with the murder of George Floyd. You know, it has really impacted what we've done and what we've experienced as a community downtown. So some of the things that you should know a little bit about DID is our ambassadors are still out there. We are at a modified schedule from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. But we've only went out of service for 2 weeks with our ambassadors. So as your employees start to return to work, you should see the cleanest downtown you've ever seen. I'm really excited for more boards to come off buildings as we try to really reanimate downtown. Some other things that we've done, you know, and just share some of our experiences with DID as well, is just the investments that we've had to, for example, put ionizer units installed in office spaces at the Ambassador Center, taking down cubicles to make more open space so it feels less constricted. Touchless is like the new word I keep hearing. So it's whether it's touchless faucets, toilets, soap dispensers, you name it, touchless is there, and it's here to stay. Ambassadors operations, we've had to modify that a little bit. You've seen the green trucks downtown or the vehicles, and a lot of times they were paired up. So now we're only operating one ambassador in vehicles at a time. And some other things that we're doing is not only cleaning, but we're desanitizing touch points out in the public space. So equipment to do that, that's a new role for our operation with our ambassador program is, you know, whether it's benches, door handles, in the public realm, we're sanitizing. We even have little misters now that you like see on the airplanes that you basically cover more area and more time. Some other things that we've had to do is, you know, with roll calls, because we're still in operation, we're doing them out in our parking garage at the Leamington ramp. So bringing that more wider space for our roll calls. And I'll turn it over a little bit, you know, behind the scenes, what you don't see a lot about with DID is our DID Safety Communications Center is here located out of the 1st Precinct. So It's a small little tiny room, but it's probably the biggest room because it networks to many of the buildings downtown. We have over 70 buildings that are on a common radio link channel with our DID Safety Communications Center. And with that said, emergency services has not stopped. It has definitely been impacted. I can tell you the police numbers are significantly down for a lot of retirees, officers leaving, but also the pandemic has affected that as well. I have been working through the shifts and have seen many officers go down on shift sick, and as you with employees have, and that does have an impact on first response and how you pull in resources and adapt to it. Even the pre-screening that we have to do health checks when coming into the precinct for having your temperature and writing down in a log what your health check is. So that's definitely new for us as well. And then the other things is crime trends, is watching those. We've seen burglaries definitely increase over the 12 to 18 months with a lot of buildings being vacant. Especially bars were hit quite significantly on their liquor stocks and different things like that. So, really trying to protect the buildings while you don't have a lot of people in them is one of the things First Precinct, DID, and everybody has been doing. But I can tell you hats off that this downtown community has been resilient. The professionals that we have on the panel and throughout on this call is truly amazing. And I think as we start seeing over the last 3 weeks, the reanimation already, I was just telling Deb, I don't think I can remember hitting rush hour coming to and from work or looking for a parking spot. I park at ramp C and I normally park on level 1. Now I'm parking on level 5. It is good, and seeing the twins coming back and some of the other things. So I'm really excited to really learn more about what we are here to talk about today from our panelists and share their experiences through this pandemic and for the last year and a half. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Deb Kohler. So Deb, maybe just give a brief summary of your title. Well, everybody probably knows you, Deb, so you probably don't need an introduction. And then maybe some of your wisdom with the pandemic over what you've experienced.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Shane, for all that you do for downtown and your work with the DID. We are in good hands with you and the ambassador program. I would suggest to anyone that hasn't worked directly with Shane on this call to reach out to him. He is a phenomenal ambassador for our downtown, and if tenants have questions or concerns, he is an excellent resource to put your tenants in direct contact with. So a little bit about me. I'm Deb Kohler. I am your current BOMA chair. I work for Accesso, who oversees both the management of the IDS Center and the Towers of West End and out in St. Louis Park. Accesso is a growing company. We have 30 Class A and Class B office properties located throughout the country. What I had the opportunity to do through the pandemic was actually participate on an internal committee for Accesso, where we set the policies and practices across our portfolio as it relates to COVID best practices. So as a result, I had the unique challenge of trying to figure out guidelines that may work in Minnesota under our local and state requirements, but they might not necessarily have worked across the country in states like Texas and Florida and cities like Chicago and Philly, each state having adopted their own unique requirements. So as you know, the Minnesota stay-at-home order had language that said, if you can work from home, you should work from home. Philly's said, basically said, you must work from home. So Philly shut it down. I mean, really hard. So trying to come up with policies and procedures that work across the country was one of the challenges that I personally was able to work through this pandemic. I know that the one takeaway from that is the flexibility. You need to be flexible. You need to be adaptable. I refuse to use the word pivot, so I've made that pretty clear. In all my calls, that word is so overused these days, but we do use it on a regular basis. Some of the specific challenges that I've worked through locally are communication. We need to make sure that communication with our employees and our vendors and our tenants is strong. And specific to my experience, the ability to communicate with the retailers, specifically at IDS Center, has really given us the opportunity to get to know each other better, make them healthier or keep them healthy through this. I know that many on this call had conversations with tenants in May of last year where we renegotiated leases to keep them solid. Then we were having that conversation again in September. Then we had it again at the beginning of this year. So really and truly, my two takeaways from this past year have been flexibility and communication.
Thank you, Deb. I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Brett Robertson.
Thanks, Shane. And I'm going to echo what Deb said. Really appreciate everything you're doing, you and Steve Kramer and everybody at Downtown Council as well. I'm Brent Robertson with Jones Lang LaSalle. We're a global commercial real estate company of 92,000 employees. My day job is leasing office buildings, working with Deb on IDS and trying to fill office space, and also the market lead for the local JLL office here in Minneapolis.
Thank you, Brett. Our next panelist, Kim Eiley, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Yes, thanks, Shane. I'm Kim Eiley with CBRE. I've been with CB for 26 years, in the industry for 33. Been a part of BOMA since my infancy, so very familiar with this wonderful organization. One thing I mirror exactly when we all started this, we looked around our buildings to see what we needed to do to change immediately, and most of what we changed will be permanent. And that is the auto, all the auto mechanisms within your building, change those all out right away. Of course, much of this wasn't in the budget. We changed our fob key to a fob/face recognition, or an Apple app for getting into the buildings. So many of the things that we've done and changed our protocols with cleaning, I don't see that going back. I think we shift, not pivot, Deb, but we shifted our teams. So maybe we have 2 day matrons coming in full time now, and we let maybe one, well, you can't let 1.5 people go anymore. With cleaning at night, it has to be 2 full-time people. But we're shifting that because the tenants have told us, and they've made comments through this entire time, that the on-site folks, which is me and my teams, have been on site since this started, and they've made comments that they love to see that day person around, just wiping down everything, escalator, elevators, all the touch points, handles. So it looks like we'll be shifting that, changed our protocols, and we'll be shifting some of those personnel for cleaning. In terms of budget, I don't know what everyone saw last year, but we definitely saw a lower utility because of, obviously, our occupancy was way down. Cleaning went up a little bit right in the beginning with the change of equipment and supplies. And then that ended up kind of panning out, and now it's leveling off to a pretty normal budget expense. So we were happy to keep communicating with our tenants and let them know what we're doing. And we actually, at the end of 2020, ended up giving back money. So it's through our CAMREX. So I think a lot of us did that. It's a good message. And then also with that message, you're able to kind of sum up what we've done, the changes that we made within our building to make it better for them to communicate to their employees so they get back to work.
Thank you, Kim. I'll turn it over to Pat Singh.
I thought you were going in alpha order. I was a little behind there. Sorry. Pat Singh, I'm the general manager at Norman Day Lake Office Park in Bloomington. Work with Cushman and Wakefield. We've got about 1.7 million feet and about 5,000 people here on a daily basis. As we all know, kind of everything stopped in March of 2020. I think I have the distinction of being the first COVID case in a commercial office building, which was really just a fun treat back in March. Probably the worst thing is it canceled my motorcycle trip with Heron out to California. So everything was put on hold. Broad brush stuff that we've learned. I'd echo Deb, kind of the ability to move, to change. We're all property managers at heart. we tend to be a little analytical, a little black and white. And if there's one thing I learned, there's nothing black and white about what's going on. I'd look on the CDC website one day and it was, you have to wipe down everything, 10 times a day. The next day it'd be with a phenolic, next day it'd be with a quick dwell disinfectant. It kept changing. And ironically now, what we're learning is very few of these things are transmitted by touch, and I'm a big fan, Shane, of the touchless stuff, because there's a lot of other stuff that does get transferred. But, I think the last stat I read was 85% plus comes person to person, and so we were chasing some ghosts throughout the year. So maintain flexibility. Two other big things that were helpful for us. Have a broad, diversified knowledge base on your staff. And when I say staff, I mean your consultants, your people on site, and your vendors. Each day I'd get into another obscure section of what we do that I had to learn a lot about. I'll say Ryan at ABM was a technical advisor to us. Some of the stuff with regard to viruses and bacteria and dwell times and all that, there is no way a property manager can know all that. So get a decent group of very technical people, and that's cleaning, it's an industrial hygienist, it's architect, it's engineer, legal, that kind of stuff. The one thing that became very important on our staff, we have a woman that helps me, Lisa Simonson. All she did was read through CDC stuff, Minnesota Department of Health. You need someone who digs through that stuff. It's not particularly fun. It changes all the time. The executive orders, I think last count, we're up to, 30 of them or something like that were pertinent. So to think that a property manager can absorb all that and act on it is just not realistic. So you have to have a broad brush of folks helping you. Diversified supply chain. Everything became in short supply. We'd go to Grainger sometimes, we'd go to Home Depot sometimes. We had, through our sourcing with our corporate office, we had all sorts of different supply chain options, and it became necessary because I don't know about you guys, but trying to find toilet paper and trying to find hand sanitizer and stuff was a problem. Be clear on communications, with your tenants, but accept some gray areas. Our first COVID letter, what do you tell people? What in the world you send out? And you have to send something out. So not making a decision is making a decision. You got to get something out there, do the best you can with it, and accept that it's not perfectly accurate sometimes, and you got to do your best. The other thing that I've kind of found was you got to be prepared to force some decisions, whether it be out of your architect, out of your consultant, out of your corporate office, out of your owner. You have to make a choice. You can't just say, for me, 5,000 people, you can't just say, I'm not sure what to do. You have to make a choice, and you have to be prepared to tell the folks above you and to the side of you, et cetera, that we need to act. And then I'll just wrap up by saying, I think our industry reacted fabulously well. Shane and his group downtown, unbelievable. Kevin and his group. When you think of what happened in March of last year and how everything was turned upside down, we survived it, quite honestly, very well. And that's because, the management group in the Twin Cities is really very professional and good. So I think lessons learned, and hopefully we don't see another one in a while. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Turn it over to Kurt Wilczek.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Kurt Wilczek, Regional Manager for Piedmont. Been in Piedmont about 5 years. I oversee our buildings here in the Twin Cities and Chicago, as well as New York buildings. I think I have about 7 million square feet under management in my region, and was, I don't know, fortunate or unfortunate, but I remember back sitting in the conference room and with the other regional managers and Kevin Fossum, and Kevin asked who wanted to take on this thing called coronavirus. And this is right when the cruise ships were just starting to report all their issues. And I thought, oh, this will be an easy one. And turns out it was one of the craziest experiences of our lives. And one of the most challenging but rewarding journeys I've been a part of. And as we quickly escalated into it, I became part of our executive COVID team with our Atlanta team down in Atlanta with our CEO, CFO, and director of HR. And we met every morning at 7 a.m. and kept consistency, strategy building, and really mapped out our path as to where we were headed. Not knowing where we were headed, but at least having some framework to have that discussion. And it was a really rewarding experience. We did that for 6 months and have since pulled back from it, of course, as things have kind of quieted down and now things start to pick up again as people look to come back to the office. But some of the things that I think were successful for us and, you know, on a greater scale is the communication. What we did was immediately set up a communication line, letting our tenants know that we've got this. We don't know where we're headed early on, but that we had the right resources, that our executive team and all of our folks were going to tackle this challenge ahead of us. And we just let people know we don't know where we're headed, but we've got all the resources, we're organized, and we're very strong and confident in what we're doing. And after that, we kept constant communications. What we did was send out a weekly email templated for my managers. I wrote them and then had a templated message for our tenants, which went out. The managers grabbed the template and then forwarded on to our tenants out to 70,000 people. So it allowed us to be consistent. It also allowed our managers not to have to make their own decisions or get caught in unique scenarios because there were so many questions coming in. We also set up kind of a hotline where all questions for the whole company came into me, and I helped answer those because we also found that we had a lot of companies in different locations, the same company, and they're asking the same questions. So we created a lot of efficiencies getting back and also being consistent, more importantly, that we were able to get the same answers back, and whether it's New York or Texas or wherever. And then we also very early on created a tenant COVID handbook, which was about a 20-page simple handbook, but it covered all the basics that with all those questions coming in, we took those questions and basically answered them all in this handbook. And we did it in a very short time period, and we're able to get that out. But the biggest thing for us was communication, of course, consistency and connectivity. And we felt this disconnect between our tenants as we were all working from home. And what we did was we created a newsletter called the Piedmont Post. And the rules of the newsletter were positive message. We were all going through a very scary time. So there was no politics, no coronavirus mentioned, nothing negative. It was all positive. It was recipes. And again, this was templated. It got sent out and still goes out, continues on. With a very positive message, positive quotes. And then we also took our fitness centers, as we had, I think, about a half dozen staff fitness centers, and with staff with no customers. And so we took that and morphed that quickly into an online program and offered that free for all of our tenants. And all that still continues today. And I think it's part of that theme that Deb and Pat and Kim and Brent, it's adaptability as we move ahead. And I think with the work flex office space coming, work from home, I think our services are going to be different. You know, I don't know exactly what, but I think, you know, being adaptable, and whether it's online fitness services or this or that, I think we're going to continue to adapt. So.
Thank you, Kurt. As you can see, the collective experience from our panelists is bar none the best. So your insights and your knowledge, and I'm really excited to get into the panel questions. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody, Riley has put up polling questions for you. I think Kevin said if you do not take the poll, it will not let you log out of Zoom all day long. So please take the poll so we can get that feedback. And then also ask questions in chat. And if you do, please do all so everybody can see the questions. And that, again, is really where we get value out of the conversation and dialogue that we have here today. So with that, I'm going to ask the polling question to our panelists. And the first question really is, has the return to office been faster or slower than anticipated? So please, if you get an opportunity, I'm going to ask all the panelists, faster or slower? And we'll start with Deb.
I was trying to take the poll, but it won't let me. It's slower, I think, than we anticipated, especially as we were working with the retailers, I want to say, and trying to keep them healthy. we had originally anticipated Labor Day of last year. And then that continues to push. And I think, like everybody else, we're starting to see more of Labor Day this year. So that's what we're seeing at our properties.
Thank you, Deb. Let's go up to Pat.
Yeah, I would say the return painfully slow for quite a while. You know, we had kind of these hoop-de-doos back in July, August. We started seeing some more people in, and then we had some outbreaks again. We were ramping up at Thanksgiving, and I think most of us experienced a disaster after Thanksgiving because everybody traveled and congregated, et cetera. So kind of bumpy and really slow at first. Now it's ramping up extremely fast for us. I think the thought of the vaccine, although it's not perfect, is taking a lot of people who were cautious, and rightly so, and said, you know what, I can accept some risk. The vaccine gives me some risk, but it does probably keep me safe. I feel like I can go back now, and we're seeing that in significant numbers all of a sudden. You know, earlier in the year, I would have said it'd be the end of this year before we're back. I've got kind of hopes that, you know, that September date really is, by and large, you know, back for a lot of folks. And a few will trail off. But so we're very slow at first, ramping up quickly now, I guess is my answer.
Thank you, Pat. Kurt.
Yeah, I think to me, it was kind of on par with, obviously we want it to be faster and get back to normal, but I think to me, it was always the vaccine is the key to the whole thing. And then there's going to be some uncertainty after the vaccines are out and kind of who got them and who didn't. And I think we're kind of working through that phase right now, but I do think things are ramping up and hearing a lot about September. People are in their routines for the summer. And I think the big return, I think we're all hoping for is September.
Thank you. Kim.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's pretty much the same across the board. It was much of a slowdown. I think at first we thought, oh, this is a 2-week thing, maybe a month. And then it went on and on. Tenants then communicated end of year, first quarter. It kept getting pushed out till Labor Day and even the end of this year, like Pat had said. But now it's speeding up. Now we're like, okay, we've got a couple tenants in buildings that originally said after Labor Day, now they're June. So my deli's opening in June with online orders. So we're kind of speeding things up again. We were ready for it, but I mean, it's reality. Now we've got to get ready for the folks coming back. We are also having a tenant at one particular building, a tenant event put on by the landlord to say, come back. You know, we've got yard, we've got a beautiful green area. We've got corn toss, basketball, a fire pit, beautiful patio area. So come back, even if you're not coming back on your quasi-permanent schedule, come and see the building, come and see what we've done. Do you remember what we had here as amenities for you, including fitness center and everything else I just mentioned? So I think that might help too. We've communicated it to our tenant leads, and they are very excited, and they've communicated the same to their employees. And I think it gets the ball rolling a little faster to get them here. So we'll have a barbecue out over a lunch hour in August, actually. So
You'll let me know when that is. August?
yeah. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Kim. Brett, faster or slower than expected?
Yeah, I'll give you two perspectives, one from a leasing standpoint, one from just our JLL's office. I'll start there. We opened in overall slow. We opened our office June 15th last year, and out of 50 people, there was probably 8 to 10 of us that were coming in. I look around just right now and we're like 80% full. So people are really coming back to the office, at least at the JLL office here. And we ripped up all the signs. There's no more circulating one way. Still have to wear masks until May 26th, unless Mayor Fry extends that. But again, slow, but really picking up now. And then leasing, we're back to pre-pandemic tours, and both in the suburbs and downtown. I think tenants are now getting comfortable that, you know what, I'm really not going to use office space all that differently. And I got a lease coming up, or I got to get people back in. So I need to redo my space. So again, overall, it's been slower, but it's really accelerating.
Thank you. Kim, I remember in our conversation earlier for this was you talked about banked PTO. And I've seen that even out of the first precinct, a lot of people, officers that haven't used their PTO and vacation and are starting to use that. So anticipating a little bit with that as well, or how does that maybe play into return to work?
Oh, for PTO?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be, it's built up, it's accumulated. We've got a lot of folks on our teams that have a long tenure, and so they accumulate quicker, and they have been able to enjoy taking their dog for a walk, taking their run, and haircuts and doctor appointments while they're at home, and they're still putting in, I would say we're working harder and longer for those folks that have been at home. But so they're able to get their work done plus, and then all their personal things that they normally would have to take using their PTO. So it's accumulating. And what happens is someone's got to pay for it if they leave, right? So, and we're seeing some movement with our employees jumping ship. And when that happens, it's either a client or CB corporate that, the corporate office that has to pay for that payout of PTO. And some of these numbers they're astounding to me, how much it will cost when, not when, but if this person would leave. So I don't know how you encourage time off, but they were able to do that over the last year without taking PTO. So it's just a question. I mean, how are we going to handle it? It's not going away. We're just trying to keep a pulse on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think as you look at the radar and try to forecast as much as you can, that definitely is a variable into time off, which is well deserved, but also impacts operation too. So with that, my next question for any of the panelists is, what are the tenants' reactions maybe to vacant or unused space? I've been down here for over the year and a half, and many employees have not. And it is eye-opening to see some of the stores that may have been there that are not anymore. Try to find a coffee shop open right now. It's tough. But I think as we reanimate, I think it'll be interesting. But anybody have any reaction on vacant space and reactions from employees?
Well, first of all, Starbucks and IDS is open. Get it? They're good. Second of all, I think we're, like we've talked about before, you have to get creative. So we really reached out at IDS to the Chameleon Consortium that Dan Collison runs through the Downtown Council. And we've been able to reanimate a vacancy on the Skyway starting 2 weeks ago. And also become super creative when it comes to retail deals. So we did announce within the last couple of weeks that we have a restaurant coming to the former Mission space. It's not a standard retail lease. It's not a standard restaurant lease. It is, for those of us in this industry, it's very similar to a management agreement where the ownership has quite a bit of stake in the success or failure of the restaurant. And so you have to be creative and find ways, because as I'm talking to tenants, they want to know, where can their employees go to the bank? Where can they go grab that cup of coffee? Where can they go to lunch? And I think it's really important that that's all part of the amenity package that we present, so that we can get people back into the office.
That's the Chameleon Shop is a great example of that. I've seen a few of those pop-up retail, and I sit on calls for the IDA as well, and I know a lot of other cities are looking at trying to activate vacant space in ways. I remember an initiative that we did with Made Here for vacant window fronts. So I definitely think that's going to be an important key to an incentive for employees to feel downtown is being reanimated. So anybody else on the call, our panelists have thoughts on vacant space?
I'm kind of with Deb there. From the standpoint of the service providers, whether it be food or even your gyms, you have to figure out a way to keep them open. We have 5 restaurants here, and 3 of them, for the most part, stayed open the whole time, with some exceptions. But you can't just roll up and close up shop. There's a chicken and egg going on, and you have to have the retail, and you got to have your people, and it's a delicate mix, and you have to find a way to make it worth it for your retailers to be there. No one likes doing that stuff. No one likes that call with their owners, but they just got to be there. So it will kind of slowly kind of self-correct, but in the interim, you do have to intervene, is what we found.
for being an on-site office with the cafe really just delivering to the tenants on site, they had to close. We subsidize as well, but it just didn't make sense for them to be open. So now they're finally looking at the numbers coming back, and we'll start off slowly with online with a couple people. Online orders within 15-minute increments will just keep going up as the team can handle the orders. But you know, we were kind of chasing those food trucks out. We didn't like them around because they were hurting our bricks and mortar businesses. You couldn't get them back. I mean, we tried everything on the suburban side to get food trucks. They're just not going to come if you have, 50 people in your building. So it was challenging, definitely challenging to try to bring some food options for our tenants during this whole time.
Yeah, I really think it depends on case by case, building by building, which companies are returning when. And I think I would agree with everybody on the panel that it's a tricky subject, a delicate dance with, working with all these retailers and when to bring them back and what kind of deals to cut and for how long and how you structure those. So I think it's the chicken and the egg, but you definitely need to have those amenities there. That's why folks love coming downtown for downtown buildings and they need them in the suburban buildings. That's the experience that you pay for renting space. So
hey Shane,
very
this is
important.
Kevin, there's a question that came in. I don't know if you saw it or not, but a question is, are any of you requiring your staff to be vaccinated before they return to work? Question number one. Number two, were OSHA regulations part of your analysis of this issue?
Just got this across an email yesterday. We are not requiring JLL employees to get vaccinated, and we're not even asking. Again, we're in Minneapolis, and Mayor Fry has the mask mandate through May 26th. So if he doesn't extend that, our policy is going to be, there's going to be a sign on the door when you enter our office, and it's going to say, if you are vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. If you are not vaccinated, you need to wear a mask until you get to your office or your cube, and then you can take it off. But I'm just reading it right now. There is some privacy concerns about actually asking employees if they're getting vaccinated, and we're going to punt on that one. Just ask grown-ups to be grown-ups about it.
Yeah, it's an honor system. We're doing the same with the signage that just says vaccinated or not. We're not asking for paperwork. It's an honor system. I would say most of the folks are going to come in without a mask, regardless of their status. But I mean, that's just the way it is.
From the standpoint of OSHA, I'll jump in on that one. OSHA kind of stayed in the background on this. I don't know if everybody else experienced that. We took most of our lead from CDC and MDH, and that seemed to cover most stuff. We did pay attention to OSHA, but they didn't push stuff out like CDC and Department of Health did. That was our experience.
This next question I have kind of ties into this one, is with Governor Walz dialing back. What are your plans on relaxing mask or social distancing requirements? Are you more apt to follow local or city guidelines or the CDC recommendations?
I'll jump on that one. At the moment, accessories policy across our portfolio is masks are still going to be required regardless of local jurisdiction in all common areas for both employees and tenants. And we are not, to answer the question about vaccination, we are not asking the question. We may have it in general conversation with employees, but it's not you must or that kind of thing. And then social distancing, we still have all of the signage on the floors, in the elevators and those kinds of things until the CDC relaxes that mandate. So it'll be a challenge once population starts to grow in the buildings. Obviously, the biggest challenge is going to be getting people up in the elevators if you still try to maintain the social distancing in the elevators. But we'll work through it, and hopefully the vaccination rate across the country will allow us to relax some of those requirements.
Yeah, we're keeping up, encouraging folks to wear masks kind of across the portfolio. One of the challenges As I think it was mentioned earlier, different regions of the country move at different paces, and Texas and the South seem to be a little more ahead with relaxing things. And we've continued to kind of keep our signage up, but it's up for debate right now, actually, working through that. And I think it's, you know, folks are much more aggressive in not wearing masks right now down in the South, and they have been kind of throughout. So it just kind of depends on the city and the market. So
Brent, I want to pose a question to you on marketability. So if you're building, not that this is one of the checklists or the bullet points for a tenant, but it could be, if you're requiring your tenants to wear masks in the common areas versus a building or landlord that does not, do you have the upper hand that you're a better building to go to? I mean, the same here. We have one building in Minneapolis, and our tenants the next day, after Wallace's announcement, no masks, and then we had to remind them that we're under prize orders, so we have to maintain those masks until the 26th. But I think you're. I'm not saying it's just let this whole thing go and don't be safe about it, but I think allowing them a tenant to choose themselves whether, and not require it in the common areas, gives you an upper hand for marketing.
Yeah, I think if you try to tell tenants what to do as a building owner, that's a bad path to go down. I think you take CDC, you take MDH, and you take whatever municipality that building is located in, and you go to the strictest of those three. And that's what we're doing. You know, CDC says don't have to wear masks. Wall says you don't have to wear masks, but Fry says you do. So we're going to defer to Fry, what he's saying with Minneapolis. But I do think, I've learned, I think a lot of people on this call have, that the mask is a very politicized issue. And depending on where a prospective tenant or a current tenant sits on that political scale, if you try to make them do anything, you run the risk of just upsetting them. So.
I got a question, Brent, on that topic of marketability. What are you hearing from your tenants that you're repping? Are they looking for certain things in certain buildings or upgrades to buildings? Or is it just, you know, depending on the building?
They want the building to be, yeah. So number one, they want it to be safe. Number two, they want as much flexibility as possible. And then number three is the amenities, question. As you know, as many on this call know, it's been an amenities arm race for years, and that's now being reconsidered. And I don't think tenants really know yet what they want. And but the biggest things right now, like I said, they want to be safe, they want it to be clean, and they want flexibility. Those three things.
Thank you for answering that. It's a tough question. I think Jim Dirda can see my question sheet, because this was actually my next question on the sheet. So Jim, if you have a camera in my office, I'd like to know about it. What are your thoughts? Like, what are you doing differently really on your cleaning operations, sanitation, deionization, your HVAC? How is that impacting maybe your budgets coming into this year and next year? Anybody want to tackle that question? Jim, and actually was the next question I was going to ask.
Yeah, I would say we've taken advantage of, obviously, of the savings on the utilities that we've seen, and really have come in under budget with large amounts of savings on that end, and taken that money and completed all the upgrades, the automated bathrooms, and put in the wave sensors, so the doors of the bathrooms and the common area doors are all touch-free. And so we've come out and made the buildings a lot better with those savings, but while still giving some money back to the tenants here. So they feel like they've had some savings as well. So it's, I would say that's really utilizing those savings.
I'd say on Jim's question on kind of the technology, I start out by telling our tenants, commercial office buildings are truly some of the cleanest places in the city. Nowhere do you get surfaces wiped down as often as we do. There's, state-of-the-art HVAC. So I think the first thing is the buildings are well run from a standpoint of hygiene. I do think there's some room, in the filtration. A lot of us with some older vintage buildings have, been stuck at MERV 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that because of static pressure drop. We've retrofitted everything to MERV 13 and or above. I think that's worth doing because it does catch a lot of particulates, and we can't just say we're trying to stop COVID because, this is going to come and go. But for general hygiene, I think increased filtration is good. I think some of the techie stuff, that we looked really hard at, the UVGI is one that really is endorsed by CDC, but it's not real practical in office buildings. The one thing that looked like it might hold some merit is the bipolar ionization. That's not without some problems either. And right now the CDC won't even mention that as kind of one of the primary ways of doing things. They're not against it. They think it's promising, but they're calling it an emerging technology. We've used it in a few of our spaces here. I think that's something that we may want to chase down further as time goes on. The hands-free stuff is kind of a no-brainer. Stuff is passed by touch. I think that's good. Most of us have had that for quite a while. Run hours and fresh air. So I think the basic shell of a safe building is there for 95% of us. This stuff is just some frosting on the cake, I guess.
I think the second part of his question, are any of your quarantine operations changing with dial-backs at all? With, if you find out somebody has tested positive how are you handling those situations?
I'll jump on that one. We haven't changed anything. We just have watched the CDC. It went from 14 days to 10 days, and so we've done that. We're still doing the notification of tenants when there's a positive that we're notified about. So it's really just paying attention to what the CDC is saying and trying to follow it. But I really like what Brent said. It's whoever has the most strict policy, trying to plan to that, and then go from there and be flexible as things change.
Thank you, Deb. This might be a tougher question. As you know, we are returning workforce back to your buildings. How are we going to deal with the elevator banks?
Who wants to touch that one, by the way, guys?
We're turning up the music.
Yeah. I think, Shane, and again, first and foremost, there's a fair amount of airflow in an elevator. That is a good thing. The door is open, and every time a door is open, you get almost a full air exchange. From the standpoint of the distancing, it's tough. You do 4 people a car, 3 people. I think that's one where people, we're going to see some development in what to do with that over the next couple of months. There isn't a great answer. That you can do the UVGI in your elevator. Some have done that. You can do the bipolar. Some have done that. But it's tough. There's not a really good cost-effective answer.
I hear you. Now that I'm parking on floor 5 at the parking ramp and I see a line at the elevator, I'm just realized how out of shape I am going up downstairs. I'm not waiting for 20 minutes to go up or down. So
we don't have 20 plus stories in most of our buildings. I think the highest is 18, but we've really decorated our stairwells, and we're and planning to. So those folks that would like to go up 8 floors and have the ability to without and getting to their office alive, they enjoy seeing some of those motivational words and some color and activity in the stairwells, because that's what they're choosing to use in and out of that building.
That's a great idea, Kim. All right, that's all I have for the first part. So let's get into the second round of questions. And I just want to remind everybody, the second polling question is going to be coming up on your screen. So please answer this question, but I'm going to ask all the panelists, when do you estimate you'll reach 75% or more tenant capacity? Rolling out your crystal ball, I know that might be a difficult question to answer, but yeah, it looks at your options by this fall, end of year of 2021, first quarter of 2022, or not sure.
Are you talking 75% of the new hybrid employee count or the
That's a good,
75,
you know,
75% of what I had?
yeah, no, that's a good, I think that's a good point, Kim. The hybrid model, I think, is here to stay.
Right.
So, what does 75% look like for you now?
I say end of year.
End of year.
I agree. I think somewhere between Labor Day and the end of the year. Are we ever going to reach our capacities we had before? I don't think so. But they'll come back. They'll come back.
Yeah, I'm thinking this fall sometime when folks get back into a new pattern with school and kids, and that's, I think, to me, that's been the target. September, October is people want to get in a routine, whether it's dropping the kids off or running their errands, and so I think that's where we'll be with folks returning. I think the flex work is going to be a thing to stay. It'll be interesting to see how much of an impact that has, long term, and what those numbers occupancy wise are in our buildings.
End of September, early October.
I agree with all. I think what will be very interesting is what is the new normal. So we're going to plateau something short of 100%. I think, it is that, to Deb's point, is that 75, is that 80, 90? Nobody knows. Let's hope it's closer to 90, because I like a full building as opposed to an empty. But that story is going to be written relatively shortly here.
I also think it's dictated by some of the big users. So the Wells Fargo's, the US banks, the Targets, what are they going to do? And I think some of our larger tenants will be potentially following suit.
Good point. Brent?
We all have to recruit out of the same pool of employees. And so, if you start offering benefits, you gotta equal the playing field.
Brent, how about you?
On return to the office, or
75%. Where do you think you're gonna?
Oh yeah, sorry. End of September, early October. I'll add a couple other comments. I had lunch with Russ Nelson on Monday. He's in retirement now, and he's mentoring students at St. Thomas. I said, Russ, so tell me, of all the kids you're mentoring, how many of them want to work from home versus come in the office? He goes, none of them want to work from home. They all want to be in the office. So I think employers need to be cognizant of that. And then the other part is, I talked to, like a lot of people either on this panel or listening in, everybody knows somebody at Target. Everybody knows somebody at Piper, Sandler, everybody. So I'm always asking these people, and it's very interesting when you talk to them, it's been nice to work from home, but like, God, I really want to switch it to this division at Target. And the guy who runs that, if I'm not in the office, I don't get to spend time with him and socialize with him. He doesn't get to know me. And I'm hearing a lot of that. And so I don't know how I don't know if this flex thing's here to stay. People are going to try it, and I'm not going to prognosticate one way or the other. But I do think there's going to be some people that try it out and say, this isn't for me. I prefer to be in and communicating and collaborating with my colleagues.
Right. That's a good point, Brent. And as we talk about, that's my next question is, what is the feeling of employees at your buildings wanting to work at home? And I think there's a second part of that question. What does hybrid really mean? Is it, I've seen people taking calls in their cars and at their lakes, and so it's this hybrid really gives the flexibility out on the Nicollet Mall. I've heard some cities are even putting flexible workspace out on the sidewalk. What is that feeling of employees wanting, one, to work at home, and two, what does hybrid really mean as this reimagined workplace?
I think we're hearing the gamut. I mean, some of it could be just the flexibility of being home 1 to 2 days a week to do that. What Kim said earlier, that flexible. At lunch, I can go get my hair cut quick. I can come back. I can continue to work, as opposed to if I'm downtown, I have to take time off for that, or I have to do it in the evening, potentially giving up time with my family. So I think there's some of that that'll happen. But I think what Brent said is really key, and it's that ability to socialize with your coworkers and really get to know people that, you know, we've all done in this Zoom Teams environment for a year. And in fact, yesterday we just did a tenant call for the IDS Center on Teams. And prior to it, we were prepping for it, and the property manager at IDS said it was so great to have the assistant property manager in her office right next to him while they were doing the call, because there's such synergy when you're with each other. And so I think part of that gets lost if we all spend too much time at home. But
I think we're losing touch with our employees as well. So we've had a few moves, and you know, unfortunately, we haven't. Some of my managers haven't been able to see their assistant folks on their teams for. I mean, they try, but it's Zoom, but it's not the face to face. And I think you lose that collaboration and that personal touch and that mentoring, face to face mentoring with someone. And they get a call, and I don't know, they see it greener on the other side. I've also read a stat that after this is all over, if an employer is requiring an employee to come back full-time, no hybrid, no flexibility, they'll leave. They'll quit and they'll go to another firm. So I think, like Deb said, I think most employers will allow some type of hybrid model.
Yeah, and I think a lot of will probably depend on the type of industry as well, whether it's an accounting firm, law firm.
Right.
And, you know, let's face it, accounting folks maybe are more introverted versus a marketing or a sales group where they do need to meet more frequently. So I think it's going to depend quite a bit. My wife works at Medtronic, and she thinks she'll be permanent work from home as an engineer, and she's been productive. And so I think it's really going to depend a lot on the industry and how people have adapted and the business models and if they've had a drop off in work productivity. But it definitely, you do miss the camaraderie in the office and that part of it. But, you know, was that 3 days in the office or 4 days in the office or 2 days in the office to get that social connectivity with your folks? Or is it 5 days in the office? Yet to be determined.
Yeah, I think timing is going to be an issue too, because to your point of, let's assume everybody does a little bit of a hybrid, getting everybody in the office at the same time in the same room is going to be a challenge. You know, you're used to being able to be somewhat certain that this person will be here and you can stop by their desk. Now it might have to be a bit more planned, you know, and I think that's fine. But it takes the spur of the moment stuff and kind of puts that at risk just a little bit.
Yep. Thanks, Pat.
specific to our, just rounding out this conversation, specific to our industry, we are a service industry.
Yep.
So, you know, you need to be available for that one-on-one or a quick meeting, or, you know, God forbid something happens at the property, you need someone to be available to respond. And so it's going to take a good balance, given the fact that what we do for a living is a service industry business.
Yeah, and I've heard from employers too, Deb, that they're using remote work as an incentive. Many cities are even offering, you know, stipends to come live because of remote work. Get a free bike, come in, we give you $10,000 to live here. So, you know, yeah, right. Yeah, I know. So they're being very creative to really, they're marketing smaller cities as well to, you know, be able to be with bigger companies. And, you know, the person that may have kids, like you just saw Jessica point out on the chat, is, you know, be able to do that commute, save that commute time, you know, be able to do some of that work 24/7 when it needs to be done, especially if it's project management type work. But it is a balance act, I think, as we start reimagining the workplace. It is not right for everybody, but maybe right for a lot of organizations that are out there too. So Todd has a question specifically on Metro Transit to step up PR efforts in educating riders. This is a big question I get a lot for returning workers is the transit ride. Is it safe? Is it clean? Are you doing anything with talking to transit? And the other one, you know, not to just put transit in a bucket, but is parking. Parking is a big one too. How far away am I parking from my building? Is it clean? Is it safe? Are you stepping up negotiations with both transits or the parking facilities? And some of you may have them on site on your building too, and that might be a more demand as an incentive, or maybe even closer by. What are your thoughts on both the transit question and kind of the transportation?
I think one of the things, and Kevin, I want to pull you into the conversation if you could unmute, but we as BOMA have talked with Metro Transit and have had them on various calls. So I know that transit is quite important to the reanimation and the tenancy of downtown specifically. So Kevin, I don't know if there's something you want to add to that conversation.
Sure. We've had Adam Harrington on our coffee social and a lot of conversations, and he's with Met Transit. First of all, they do have a significant portion of their website that deals with the protocols that they've instituted many months ago in terms of how often it's cleaned and sanitized, et cetera, masks for the riders, et cetera. It's quite extensive from that, and one that's the safety aspect of it is kind of is something that we're paying very close attention to. Chief Rizal is on the safety calls every other Friday and provides his report. He's they know that there are some issues associated with that. And Shane is very close to Chief Rizal in that regard. I'll also add to it that it's, as someone said, the chicken and the egg deal in the beginning. On some of the HR calls we've been on, the question is, well, Met Transit, when will you be ramping up your number of routes, et cetera? Met Transit said, when are your employees coming back to the office? Because it's no mystery that it's a real financial situation with them now, and we're trying to support getting some state funding to Met Transit for that. But I don't know, we remain in contact with them on those HR calls and the safety calls. And I don't know, Shane, if you want to add anything to that and for Chief Rizal's engagement with the business community.
Yeah, and we do virtual safety calls every other week with Chief and law enforcement and a lot of our downtown property management. But I think as you not only have the experience inside the bus, it's also to and from the bus stop to the building, and whether it's the bus stop, if I'm walking 6 or 8 blocks inside or outside, skyway safety or outdoor safety. One thing DID is doing, I'm really happy, Lisa Midday from our office is starting up Farmers Market and Makers Market again on Thursdays, starting June 3rd. So really excited about that whole experience that you might have going to and from your building. I think that's really important. And we're going to start things a little bit earlier, bring it through the lunch hour and so on. And then the other thing that DID is doing is bringing back Joint Beats initiatives as of June 1st. So it's day after Memorial Day, where we have extra police from Metro Transit, Hennepin County Sheriff's Department, and MPD downtown and being visible. So those are another things that I think are really important for your employees, your staff to know that those efforts are being done. So yeah, that is a big question I get a lot, is transit safety and parking lot safety and walking to and from your buildings. Once you're in your buildings, they feel safe. I do truly think most employees feel very safe from the hygiene and personal safety. So it's the delta in between.
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left for our first session here. And I don't want to jump in, Shane, but I saw that Jumpin' Jim Durda said spec suites regarding social distancing in the pandemic. How has your spec suite design changed? Are you still doing them? Thank you. And so back to you, Mr. Moderator.
That's a good question. Who wants to field that?
Well, we just had a leasing call, and that's all they're asking for: short-term leases and spec suites that have that cool furniture that's distancing or has the partitions between it. Sorry, Brent, this is your baby. So
no, that's all right. Yeah, that's exactly right. They're in high demand. We're still doing fully furnished. We're what we're not doing as much as buying the cubes. We're buying the office furniture, we're buying the stools, we're buying the the chairs at the entrance, but we're not buying the cubicles because we're finding that, again, everybody's comfort level is there's a spectrum, and so you buy something and then it's just not what the tenant was looking for. It doesn't allow as much separation as they wanted. So that's the one thing we stopped doing is buying the actual cubicles, but still buying all the other furniture. But yes, spec suites are in high demand for tenants under 10,000 square feet.
Not surprisingly, we've seen bench seating kind of go by the wayside. That was a really big thing just pre-COVID. You can get, I don't know, 4 feet of countertop and benches and maybe a little partition in between. And if anybody wants a good deal on used furniture, see me on that one.
Well, yeah, and then we were worried about our HVAC systems being able to handle the bodies, and and we're going just the opposite. I mean, I should be in the Interium, or got to be working for that furniture company right now because they're raking it in.
Is anybody doing any incentives for employees returning to work, being creative to draw them back?
I mean,
go ahead.
Well, at our park, I think our incentive is to show everyone we're alive and well. We're giving away some happy hours. We're giving away some food. We're doing all sorts of stuff that says, this is just what it was when you left. It's even a little more exciting because you've had a 1.5 year break. We're trying as hard as we can to make it easy to come back. I think that's our mantra here.
Anybody else?
I think to what Pat said and what Kurt said earlier, we're doing the same things, but also offering for those that are doing the flexible models online. So, online fitness center classes, online meditation classes, financial, well-being classes, those kinds of things, just to remind them that we are a resource and that we're an important part of their business. So hopefully we can bring them back.
And having that party I mentioned, planning an event for the tenants' employees to all come back, not putting the onus on the tenants to collaborate and they actually have the tenants meet each other. I think that's a good sign. And then we're also giving out gift, cards for free lunch, the online ordering system that will start up in June.
I asked my chair, Deb Kohler, if there's an incentive for me to come back to the office, and her response was, your incentive is you get to keep your job. Harsh, but
for a while.
I was just watching last night what the incentives to get your COVID shot, and I wish I would have known I could have got free Think tickets. No, so
there
I think
you go, being proactive, Shane.
Right. So, as management, what do you suggest moving forward to attract new tenants?
Picking the right amenity. I think that's going to be the new amenity race. What does that look like? It might not be, a 150 person conference room. I think it's more of how can that conference room be flexible with both the ability to group people and to do Zoom calls or, do some technology integrated into it, because I think tenants are going to want to be able to do both. So having the ability to do that flexibility in those conferencing centers, and I really think it's flexible space. Brent is my broker at both of the buildings locally, and I've heard a million times you gotta figure out the flexible space piece. So
yeah, I think it's going to be, I think Pat mentioned it earlier with conferencing facilities. If you're going to come back to work, it's going to be a lot of logistics and using technology to coordinate events. So just not a mass group of people, but you can reserve and reserve on the fly. I think flexibility and utilizing technology. We've got our beautiful amenity center at Bancor, and we're going to have to kind of rethink how we're going to use that space, whether it's more private events, maybe private events in the afternoon for a tenant rents out the space because they're comfortable with their own employees. we don't know yet. It's, but we've got all these beautiful amenity centers and all these awesome buildings. And I think they're going to have to adapt, just like we talked about earlier. And I think there is going to be some more work involved, more services provided by the management groups, and being more better thought out as far as logistics, I guess I would say, and safety, making sure people, when they show up, they're comfortable. Because there may be people that show up that are not comfortable being in a building. So they're, it's going to be our job to make them as comfortable as they can as they come back.
And I see Raymond asked that question too, is there certain amenities that they're not asking for that you maybe have a lot of investment in that are being considered to be repurposed for something, or how do you drive that amenity attraction to what's not being used?
I can tell you on tours, we're still showing the amenities, and I feel like the tenant's mindset is, I can see myself leasing space in this office building, and I'm going to use office space like I used to use it eventually, because this too shall pass. I mean, I think all these corporations that are trying to get back to the work, I'll use Amazon as an example. They called us and said, hey, we need to expand in Minneapolis, and then they said, time out, we don't know how we're going to go back to the office. So by the time they figure it out, guess what? We're all going to be vaccinated. We're all going to be back at the office. So I think to Raymond's question about the amenities, we don't know. Tenants haven't said, hey, we don't want to use that conference room. I've never heard that said on a tour. We're not going to use that conference room now because of COVID. We're not going to work out in that gym now because of COVID. Their mindset is purely about this too shall pass. So we're racking our brains on what is the next amenity, and to date, and this is not just Minneapolis, this is leasing agents I talked to all across the country. The consensus is it's kind of going to just go back to being the way it was, just like after 9/11.
Yeah, I would echo Brent on that. I think we're ramping up quickly, and I think this will be a bit of a blip in the past. No, it's a blip, it's a blip like we've never seen. And I do think some renewed thought about hygiene and cleanliness was going to stick around. I just think that's going to be, because if it's not SARS-CoV, it's going to be another H1N1. It's going to be something. So I think that sticks. I think fundamentally changing the way they interact at work right now, I don't think that's going to change. I think it's moved a little bit to one side, but they are going to get back to what they did before.
Thank you,
I agree. And Pat, don't you think, like, to some degree, like, should we have been doing MERV 13 filters the whole time?
Yeah, that is the question. That's why I think get away from some of the techie stuff, but back to good building operations. And yeah, MERV 13, you know what? It's a good idea. We should try to do it. It does get rid of all sorts of stuff. So augmentations, what we've already had in place, I think is the best road for the future.
Kim, you have a final comment, and I think it's time to wrap, Shane.
Yeah, I just want to thank all the panelists. This has been a great dialogue and conversation. Thank the participants for your questions. Those are great questions. We'll get through this. I'm really looking forward to reanimating our city, our communities. So thank you for having me and letting me moderate this conversation today.
Well, thanks. And
Thanks, Shane.
I'll add my gratitude to Pat, Kurt, Kim, Deb, Brent, and our illustrious moderator here, Shane Zahn. Thank you. I mean, we could have talked for another hour because it keeps changing, and that's why we'll probably have a part 2 to this at some point when we're really at the end of all this. So with that said, thank you all. We're going to take a 5-minute break, everyone, so you can go get some coffee, water, or do whatever you need to do. So we'll see you back at 10:26 for part 2, and you're going to want to hear this program as well. Thank you, and we'll see you momentarily.
Do we have to log back in?
No, I think it'll log us back in. Just takes us out of presenter and logs us.
Right. Okay, good.
Welcome back, everybody. This will be officially our part 2 of our two-part BOMA educational program today. As you're topping off your coffee and coming back after a break, terrific information was shared in the world of commercial real estate in the first half. We're going to take a little different perspective on how the other industries have been affected and what certain protocols have been instituted and so on. And I think we all understand that commercial real estate alone is just one part of the equation. You don't have a successful downtown or commercial real estate unless you have other aspects of it, which rounds out a destination. So whether it's hotels and restaurants, theaters, sporting events, or business climate in general, we all succeed when we all succeed, as they say. So I'm really delighted that we can welcome 3 individuals who I'm on a lot of calls with these folks, many of them, as we have walked through the last 12 to 14 months, certainly with the what we thought was going to be something that was going to be over in a couple of months, then almost in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, we've really spent time kind of learning from one another what our particular business markets and worlds are. So anyway, I'm delighted to have 3 guests on that'll talk about how they've reacted and how they're rebounding and recovering in their industry. So the 3 individuals I'd like to introduce first, and then we'll start off with Steve Kramer, who is the president and CEO of the Minneapolis Downtown Council and DIT Improvement District. Prior to the DID, he was a Minneapolis City Council member, director of CPED, among many other associations. I mean, Steve and I talk almost every single day or communicate. So Steve will be joining us. And then Mark Nernhausen is the president CEO of the Hennepin Theater Trust. Prior to the trust, he served as founding director and professor of practice at the Janklow Arts Leadership Program at Syracuse University. And Mark has held major positions with performing arts organizations in Florida and Hawaii, as well as serving on a number of nonprofit organization boards. He's also brokered strategic partnerships with regional and national organizations, several of which were devoted to the minority arts and so on. And Mark, even though he represents the Hennepin Theater Trust, he's certainly well-versed in what's going on in the entire world of theater. So not just the Hennepin Theater Trust. And then Courtney Rees is the Senior Vice President of Destination Branding. Let me start that over. Destination Branding and Strategy. Courtney, you got to shrink that up a little bit. For Meet Minneapolis, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and oversees the marketing, communications, partnership, and visitor center development departments at the city's tourism board. She returned to Minneapolis from Travel Portland, where she worked for 8 years as vice president of marketing. In the last year, her focus has been a new local community campaign, including billboards, radio ads, websites, content featuring ways for residents to support small and Black owned businesses. So we're delighted to have them on. And again, you're going to see some really compelling information shared in the chat. Remember, go into the chat to ask those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Courtney. And we know that Courtney has to drop off about 10 minutes before the hour for another national call. So Courtney, thank you for your time today. And let's hear the world of meetings, conventions, and marketing this destination.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone's opportunity for me to share a little bit about what's been happening in the tourism industry in the past year. So To go forward, let's go back a little bit. I think that it's really important to be able to flag and show that as you look at what happened with hotel occupancy, the percentage, as we saw over the course of the last number of months, Minneapolis has been disproportionately affected. There's a number of reasons for that. One, we are more reliant on business travel than other destinations. Two, we did have a number of hotels that stayed open throughout the pandemic, whereas in other destinations, some closed, many times for a full year. And third, we obviously have seen what we always have promoted as a big asset of our destination, which is the diversification of our businesses, which has allowed us in many instances to weather the recessions or the pullbacks a little bit better than other destinations. All of those industries were hit simultaneously. So if you think about sports, if you think about sporting events, if you think about conventions, if you think about leisure travel, all of that ground to a halt overnight, and really in our case affected what we saw when it came to hotel occupancy. I also want to point out that Minneapolis is continuing to lag behind as well as a city destination, even in our metro area. So we do know that urban destinations suffered more than suburban destinations. Some of that, again, is also the diversification of product. If you think about, I want to drive, I don't want to fly, I want to have my car with me. There's free parking generally in some of those areas. They are a lower price point, easier to come and go if you're just looking for a quick trip. So I just think it's very important to point out again that it is still something that Minneapolis is lagging behind. When we've talked about tourism and the recovery of the industry, we've talked often about what we call the 2 V's, the vaccine and the verdict. So where are we when it comes to some of these things that are coming up? Well, first of all, we do have a lot of events that are returning thanks to the opportunity with the vaccine. So we do have a number of site visits, people that are coming in and looking at the city. We do have a lot of other promotions that we're going outbound. So I think it's just important to note and be excited that we are having people coming this August back into the convention center. We also have a number of really big dates that are on the calendar for 22. So there's a lot of hope and optimism as we think about that. So when we think about the verdict and the vaccine as it relates to actual, again, leisure travel, which we think that will really pick up versus the meetings travel this summer, you can see that there is this decrease in terms of resistance. People are very excited and they are making their travel plans. And you can see that in these increased numbers. The market is very ripe for people to come back, particularly as it relates to leisure travel. As you have been discussing this morning, we do know that business is going to take a little bit longer, and that carries over into our convention product. One of the longer term things that we know that we are going to be facing is the perception of safety. What do people think about Minneapolis, and how do people think about Minneapolis? I have a lot of research that talks about the awareness of the killing of George Floyd, the national media coverage, the exposure of that. But I think it's also important to note that that awareness has continued, both as it related to the trial itself and then the killing of Daunte Wright, which many people did associate with Minneapolis. So again, just from awareness perspective, from a national landscape, while we as locals may have been very aware, nationally, many people were aware as well. And this is unfortunately affecting how people think about this city. This slide is borrowed from my peer in Seattle, where she was presenting to her community and talking about how people are saying not so great things about Seattle on social media, but they're saying not great things about other destinations. I do want to draw your attention to what people are saying about Minneapolis. This is the first quarter of this year. Social media conversation aggregated for tone. Are people saying positive things? Are they saying negative things? And you can see just how much of a larger hill Minneapolis has to climb. A lot of this is awareness around confusion of, did the city burn? Is there a police force? What's going on? Is anybody open? All of the boarded up windows, things of that nature. So there's a lot of education that we'll be doing in the next few months, along with all of my peer organizations and many of you, as I know that this is something that we are all struggling with to provide the current information, which is not necessarily what people think that it is. As it relates to actual perception of the destination from meeting planners and meeting attendees, key audiences for us. I do want to point out that as we think about behavior, do people plan to come to Minneapolis in the next year? Unfortunately for us on this list and survey, we actually came in last. People are very wary about coming to Minneapolis for a number of reasons. We could see here as it relates to public safety, it's particularly acute as we talk about meeting planners. So meeting attendees in general feel pretty confident about the safety in Minneapolis, although there is a group of people that don't know exactly how to feel. Meeting planners are much more wary. They're designed to be a little bit more cautious, because if you think about it as a meeting attendee, you only have to worry about yourself. A meeting planner has to worry about all of their attendees, all of their sponsors, and a much broader purview. So it makes sense that they would be a little bit more risk adverse and have some more questions as it relates to the destination. So those are the headwinds that we have. All that being said, as you will hear, I'm sure, from Steve talking about the vigorous campaign that they will be running for downtown reanimation, we will also be doing some programs in kind to be able to talk about Meet Minneapolis and all of our audiences to try to get the tours and visitors back. So who do we talk to? We talk to decision makers. Oftentimes we're talking to meeting planners that are looking short-term, long-term, many times years out. We're talking to events rights holders, so sporting events and groups. We're also talking again to those leisure visitors. I just need a weekend. I just want to go to the big city. Maybe I just want to go to a Twins game because I haven't been, and maybe I'll spend the night. So for us, it was really important that we were able to have a flexible campaign that we're able to modify as news and as comfort levels return. And one of the things I do want to point out is, like many others, we'll be prioritizing the idea of conversations versus just straight advertising. We have a very complex message to be able to share with people. Education is power, knowledge is power, and awareness. So we want to be able to do that through our marketing and through our public relations outreach. You'll also see, again, the continuation of talking about COVID and talking about those sanitation protocols, again, very similar to many of you, and talking about, is this going to weigh, or is this going to be just part of our normal course of business? I think it'll just be part of our normal course of business. And obviously the reputation of the city, safety concerns, we do know that there's a lot going on from the city level as it relates to safety, and trying to explain all of those changes for those that in many cases may have a local meeting group that is working with their national group to say, hey, come to town. So they're hearing information from the locals, and it prompts a lot of questions about what's actually happening here. So again, wanted to kind of talk a little bit about who we're talking to and how we're going to be talking about it. You can see that obviously we have a lot going on with our campaigns. There's a very broad message. We want to make sure that we are flexible and that we're able to, again, talk about the variety of reasons that people are interested in Minneapolis. We also know that from a psychology standpoint, that people like lists, right? They like their investment. My colleague likes to say she'll always click on like the top 10 burgers lists, no matter where they are. People like to know that their commitment to a time is limited, and it makes it seem a little bit more special when it is just a number. And we also wanted something that was flexible because we knew we had many audiences to talk to. So with that, we have a campaign that we'll be running in many markets called the Top 8 Reasons Why. We'll be talking about all of these different opportunities. This is just an example of how it shows up into the meetings market. You can see all of the different assets that we will be creating as it relates to this. We'll also be being able to customize it depending on the group. So again, just opportunities to be able to talk about the city, talk about what's happening here, and to be able to provide some more information and more reasons. We can customize it depending on targeting. We can talk to families. We can talk to niche groups. We'll also be doing a couple of other layered components. One is a more direct call to action to book a hotel stay, and that's with the idea of make it a weekend. So we will be packaging all of these great things and convincing people that they should really just stay over. They should really just spend the night. So maybe you're going to go for a Twins game, but you didn't also know that there was a great brunch special that was happening at Hell's Kitchen. Maybe you didn't know that there was an opening of a new retail shop. So we're trying to package all of these things, make it seem like there is enough there for somebody to say, you know what, it's not just a day trip. I want to spend the night. I want to make it a weekend. So we'll be continuing to do a lot of advertising around that, as well as compelling reasons for people to kind of come and see this across different mediums. So this is Expedia, which is one of those mediums where we will be also advertising this campaign. And finally, I also wanted to make a note about how one thing that we are doing differently this year, and we know that the downtown reanimation is so incredibly important. Steve and Leah and their team in downtown have created, again, a very robust campaign that he'll be talking about. And one of the things that we'll be doing is investing in their campaign, particularly as it relates to the overnight, make it a weekend stay, and having people, again, giving a little bit more of a reach to their media buy so that we are able to also share some of those shared messages, because we know that there are many components that make up downtown, the workers, the residents, the day visitors, and we know that the overnight visitors are an important part of that, and we want people to come back and become more comfortable, as it were. I went through a lot of slides. I always talk very fast, but I know there's a lot of information, and colleagues that I have to work with have a lot of information to share as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. I'm sweating. Oh my God, that was fast. But no, I should add, we know the value of commercial real estate, the economic impact that we have on the community and also the state of Minnesota. But just as important is the amount of economic impact that the tourism, convention business, special events creates for our city and for the community in the state. So we had a great reputation. That reputation has been damaged in the last year or two, and I know the efforts by Meet Minneapolis to bring in those special events, the Super Bowl and Final Four, that they just don't happen. There's a lot of competition out there, so some of the marketing efforts and programs that Courtney and her team are instituting in the long run will certainly benefit all of us. So thank you, Courtney. And whenever you need to drop off, go ahead and do so. Next up, Mark. We want to talk a little bit about the theater. And I don't think anyone on this call, or 125 people, cherish the thought of having a dark theater, dark stage, for an extended period of time. It's really, and maybe the statistic in the day we were second behind New York, I think, in the number of theater or live performance seats in the nation. I don't know if that's changed or not, other than to show what on the spectrum of what we have here as an attribute in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, that theater is it. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you so much. And you hit it with that comment about the number of theater seats and the attribute that represents. And so who we are, I want to go back to your comment earlier that who we are, I'm speaking not just on behalf of Hennepin Theater Trust, but the arts and entertainment and cultural sector as an industrial sector. People in my field don't often talk about us as an industry, but we are an industrial sector. And we're a major economic driver, particularly in Minneapolis, when you mentioned the number of theater seats. We bring in billions of dollars to the economy. We create 22,000 jobs, and cultural tourists spend more than other tourists. So this is a very valuable sector that we represent. Next slide, please. When I talk about us as a sector too, I mean, it's Hennepin Theater Trust, it's the Guthrie, it's First Avenue, it's Orchestra Hall, it's Kohl's Center, it's Brave New Workshop, it's the Dakota, it's the Walker, it's Mia, it's the Children's Theater. There's something like 25 stages in the immediate downtown area. We bring in about 7 million people a year to the downtown. Approximately over 1 million of those are visitors. And again, they spend more in our restaurants and hotels than other tourists. And we're here 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year. And finally, as you mentioned, Kevin, we're a key driver to brand and reputation for the city. We establish an image for the city. We're one of the reasons we're consistently ranked as one of the most livable states in the nation. We're consistently up there as a reason why people want to live in an urban setting, in a downtown setting. We are the play part about the work and play aspect of it. So that's who we are. Next slide, please. We provide 3 functions, key functions that affect the business of everyone that's here on this call. We host attractions. That creates direct and immediate economic impact. The activities on our stages, in our galleries, at our festivals, at the concert halls, bring in millions of people a year that fill the hotels, book tables at restaurants, visit the bars, shop at the stores, and ultimately want to live and work downtown and are proud to call this city home. We're also an attractor, that's one of our functions, that builds the reputation and the brand of the city. We help give this city a competitive advantage as we're competing against other cities. And every one of the organizations that I mentioned that I'm here representing are nationally and internationally recognized organizations. They are part of the reason this is recognized as a world-class city. So when we talk about what goes on at these organizations, that is very specific to Minneapolis. It's, you know, when we talk about what goes on with Target, for example, that's amorphous. That's Target Corporation. They're global. When we talk about Hennepin Theater Trust or First Avenue, we are talking about our city and our downtown. And finally, as it affects this group, we're a means of communication. Our combined mailing list reaches millions of people. We're trusted sources of information to those people, and we disproportionately reach people with greater degrees of influence, higher incomes, higher education levels, and decision makers. These are the people that need to know about the downtown. So when we look at what we're doing specifically, well, the obvious thing is the first thing, we drive activity, and this is the season that we have coming up. Hennepin Theater Trust is going to be reopened in October for Broadway, in September for concerts. When this all started, I never believed that we'd be closed for a year, but we were, and I can't wait to have the marquees lit. I can't wait to see the downtown filled with people. And of course, this matters to everyone on the call because that means the return of millions of people to the downtown and to the restaurants and to the bars and to the hotels. And this is what, when we talk about make it a weekend campaign, this is the reason, one of the reasons for making it a weekend downtown. We also drive the image. Next slide, please. Some of the activity that we do is not about driving large numbers of people downtown, but it's about driving the image of the downtown. We're coming up on our Spotlight Showcase that reaches high school theater students from around the state. It matters to those students, but that message also sends a message to the entire state that the downtown is safe, that it's active, that people are there, that there's activity going on. When we present public art like It's the People or 9 to 5 performances, and we promote those performances on social media, those happen outside. And what's happening is people are seeing that we are a diverse community, that we are a welcoming community, that we're active, that it's safe to be on the streets. So a lot of those perceptual barriers get broken down by the evidence that we're presenting. And again, I want to remind everyone that this is not just about the residents for the downtown, but this speaks to everyone in the metro area, and it speaks to the nation, because the organizations that are doing this are nationally recognized organizations and have a national reach. And finally, in addition to driving activity and driving image, we drive messaging. We don't just do these activities, we are talking about these activities. Our combined mailing list numbers in the millions. We are out there telling our audiences in Wayzata and Minnetonka and Alexandria and Fargo and Winnipeg and Iowa that downtown is open for business, that it's still desirable, that it's safe, and that Minneapolis is the place they remembered that it used to be, and that the events of the past year have not changed that. And that matters to visitors. It matters to companies wanting to continue to fill the buildings with their office workers. And it matters as we try to attract talent to this community, because we are competing not just with visitors with Denver and Seattle and the other cities that Courtney had, but we're competing for talent. And we know that quality of life matters almost as much as salary when people are making a decision to relocate. So that's what the world of culture and the arts are doing. We got lots of good shows, and I'd be remiss if I didn't tell anyone, buy your tickets for Frozen. It opens at the beginning of October.
And I know Christine Frederick from our staff has already purchased hers, so that's happening. Great information, Mark. And just for everyone's benefit, all of the venues, the theaters and so on, have gone through stringent protocols for cleanliness, just like all of you have in our commercial office buildings. And I think what you've learned here too is that Mark's organization isn't just about acquiring a performing theater or whatever. They market the city in that regard too, with other events that he is noted here. So again, you have Meet Minneapolis, you have the Hennepin Theater Trust, and certainly the sports teams too, along with BOMA and our commercial real estate, the business community. We really do rely on one another. So thanks, Mark. And somebody who could be considered a maestro in putting all of our groups together, the swizzle stick that stirs the drink. In all seriousness, the Downtown Council and DID under Steve's leadership has been in these very unusual times, has really helped bring everyone together so we can have a unified front in re-energizing, recreating Minneapolis in that regard. So we're delighted to have Steve Kramer, President CEO of the Downtown Council. It's yours, Steve.
Great, Kevin. Thank you so much. So that might be the nicest thing you've ever said about me. So.
And last.
And last, right. I almost didn't recognize that guy in the picture with the eye on. So I think Christine's going to help me run my slides too, because I'm just not very good at that. So I'll go quickly because I know we're kind of at time here almost. But Christine, if you go to the next slide. As we put 2020 in the rearview mirror, and thank God for that, going into this year, I think very much building on Courtney and Mark's comments, we felt like the key to reanimation for this year for downtown would be to build confidence around public health, public safety, and to restore downtown vibrancy, those aspects of the downtown environment that attracted people in, workers, residents, visitors, and the like that we just really didn't see in 2020. So those were kind of our mantras going into the year. Christine, next slide, please. And we had a number of early activities to try to get us back to that downtown that we all remembered and valued. People in the office, Nelson Cruz trotting the bases with a full house at Target Field, people at the Commons, folks at Mark's Great Theaters for a show. And so to do that, some of our early activities, next slide, please, included creating last fall, a reanimation dashboard, and Kevin and BOMA and many of the people on the call have been a great partner in providing information for that, just to try to give people a realistic look at some of the key metrics of the downtown economy. I remember, and we all know this, people who used to be downtown decision makers about downtown activities hadn't been downtown for months and months, going on a year now. So just really giving them good information about what is actually happening, how many people are in offices, how much Metro Transit capacity is being used, what stores and restaurants are open, seemed like a valuable thing. So that's updated on a regular basis. We also implemented early in the year a grant program with support from Target, Excel Foundation, Thrivent, and RBC Wealth Management, targeting retailers and entertainment venues and restaurant bars, along with some of the public programs, of course, just to try to help them make it and bridge over to a time when the customer base would be more restored and they could sustain their businesses. And then finally, as I'm sure Shane mentioned, I didn't listen to all of the first panel, but I caught some of it. We rolled out our annual safety program much earlier than ever before, with many more aspects to it. Again, getting back to that idea of building confidence around public safety. So those things have already occurred. And now looking forward, Christine, next slide, please. We're trying to set the stage for back to office. And I know that was a big part of the previous discussion. So these are just a few results from a recent member survey that we did. And this question was, when do you think your kind of target month for bringing people back to office will be? And you can see there's a small percentage of companies or members that were saying it'll be over the course of the summer. So our last metric about people in office, which was 23.3%, physical occupancy, kind of butts and seats, not lease space, I think will build over the summer, but then we'll hit this inflection point around Labor Day. And I think everybody's been saying that. So literally 50% of the respondents to the survey said September is our month. And I think that's also when next slide, please. a number of the kind of return or future of work policies will be implemented. You can see 80% of the respondents said, yeah, we're going to have a new policy about working that's going to introduce more flexibility. And a lot of those policies will be implemented in September, and that's when people will come back to work under those policies. Next slide. And I think it's hopeful to me that for the most part, companies are saying, even when we introduce that level of flexibility, we're going to have people in the office 3, 4, even 5 days a week. So as many of the members, Kevin, from your organization who manage these buildings were saying, we're going to have people coming back. It's not going to be like it was before. Our annual daily count of workers of 218,000, which was the number we reported for 2019 at our 2020 annual meeting just before COVID really shut things down. We're not going to be there immediately, or maybe not ever. I don't know. We'll see how that works out. But we're going to have a lot more people than we've had for the last year for sure. And even now, it's just going to build and build over the course of the summer, hit that inflection point in September, and then continue building through the end of the year. Next slide, please. To help support that, and again, I think Shane mentioned this, certainly all of the activities that kind of get at that downtown vibrancy goal as well, that our organization has been responsible for, again, complementing the great work that Hennepin Theater Trust does on Hennepin and bringing Broadway into the city. All of those activities will be back. So Market Thursdays, Downtown Thursdays, Farmers Market, Makers Market. Metro Transit has agreed to take the buses off Nicollet on those days until mid-afternoon, early morning through mid-afternoon. So we'll put picnic tables out in the middle of the street, just to really make it a fun day to be downtown on Thursday. And that'll start on June 3rd and then run through the fall. Next slide. We want to use the great new asset of the renovated PB Plaza, which didn't really have much of a run before COVID hit. So, back to life at PB, all the fountains are working, the water features are up and running right now. And we want to do a lot of programming up there as well, along with the Minnesota Orchestra. So that'll be another asset. Next slide. Pianos on Parade will be back. Kind of a fun thing, and people are just sitting down and pounding out songs at the piano. My only thing is, please participate, just be self-aware about your level of talent and play accordingly. And then finally, the big civic events, Aquatennial, this summer, will be back. The guidance that now dictates our public health related activities allows these sorts of events to occur. So the Center Point Torchlight Parade on June 21st will kick things off, and then we'll, as always, kind of culminate with the fireworks over the river that Target presents on the 24th. So we hope for big crowds. You can kind of see in this picture the riverfront being packed with people. I mean, in past years, 250,000 people would come to downtown to see those fireworks. So I don't know if we'll get that this year, but certainly it'll be a big crowd, and again, a way to get people back into downtown, reintroduce them to this environment. And then finally, next slide, please. As Courtney mentioned, kind of complementary to the marketing work that Meet Minneapolis is doing, the Downtown Council has been working with a lot of partners, Meet Minneapolis, BOMA, many others probably on this call, to create this kind of reanimation communication campaign, which will be rolling out next the week of Memorial Day with a package of creative assets that any partner can use to promote kind of back to restaurant, back to sports, back to theater, back to office, whatever it might be. And a number of kind of activations along with the normal programming that Downtown Council and DID do to support this campaign will be occurring as well. So this will be rolling out starting in early June and then through the rest of the year into 2022. Next slide, please. It's been a pretty methodical process to kind of plan and engage people up until now, and now we're at kind of the trigger point. Next slide. And to measure the effectiveness, we'll certainly be looking kind of back to this issue of confidence through regular surveys and social media monitoring, kind of looking to see if confidence is being restored, and if that's measured in more people around downtown through traffic and office occupancy and events and the like, and kind of the level of participation in our activities. So final slide for me. this effort is about all of us. It's all of our shoulders at the wheel, and look forward to working with everybody who has an interest in kind of being part of this reanimation campaign. And if you're interested and you haven't heard about it, contact me, contact Leo Wong, and we'll get you involved. So with that, thank you for giving me a chance to be part of your program, Kevin.
Thanks, Steve and Mark and Courtney. And I hope all of you are realizing the type of dedicated professionals and their associations are to reanimating recovery, our destination. We're all working hard on it, and we appreciate our guests here today. By the way, this has been recorded and will be placed on our website. So if you'd like to go back and you know, slow down the speed especially when Courtney was talking, you might be able to hear it. But no, if you want to go back and look, it'll be back on our website. So we're at the top of the hour. Again, thank you to all of our guests. Thank you for registering and being a part of this conversation. And don't forget for our upcoming summer events to go to our Connect Ed, which comes out every Tuesday morning. With that, thanks everyone. We appreciate your attention. Have a great weekend. See you soon.